All right, welcome back, the genius. Okay, things are getting very much interesting. We are getting higher from beginners level. We are advancing a bit. So we are still talking about functions. In the last section, we discussed why do we need functions. Okay, so now today in this section, let's talk about function parameters and their return values. Now, the thing is this, there are some things I might be mentioning here that might be advanced a bit. So if you don't get it, please don't beat yourself. If you don't really understand it, don't beat yourself. I'll try as much as possible to explain it in order not to cause confusion. Okay, so what I mean is this, if I'm trying to use something to explain it, and if I think that that will cause more confusion, I'll have to drop it. All right. But the thing is that we have these things I'm talking about, they are in the advanced course. All right. So as we advance more, we are still going to repeat those things. So, but for now, I can just mention them. If you understand them, you get it. If you don't get it, don't forget about it, but just have it in mind that that we'll still have to visit it again. Okay. So whenever we get there, I would mention it. I'll try to explain it as much as possible without confusing you. All right. So let's get into it. Now, what are functions, parameters, and return values? All right. So now the thing is this, okay? We said that we use function to do perform a specific task. And most times, all right, we actually create our functions for other people to use or for us to use it later. When you start creating APIs, you'll be creating basically functions that people would actually use. So the thing is this, you will make it more generic so that they can actually each if I'm let's say now we created the function greet. All right. Now this greet can actually be greeting people. It could be greeting people in different languages. It could be greeting people with different names. So when I say I want to greet somebody, I want to greet John. I want to greet Henry. I want to greet James. Now, I could make it very generic that that name, all right, that particular person I want to greet, I could ask them for their name. So when I'm asking them for their name, I could actually provide a way for them to actually give me their name. So this is where function parameters come in. Okay, you are creating a function for people to use or for you to use later. Now, you would want them to give you something for you to work with. Let me put it that way. So I'm asking you to give me something for me to work with, and that something could be different. Different people can give me different things. John, if I'm asking for a name, John will give me his name as John. James will give me his name as James. Do you understand? So this parameter is like a placeholder for me to accept something from you. You that is going to call my function. Remember what function call is. You that is going to use my function. All right. I want you to give me something I can now work with. Now, remember, function performs a specific task. So after performing that task, that function could return something to me. Me that is actually calling the function, me that wants to use the function. Whenever, let's say we have a function that is performing some calculations for us, we would want that function, after performing that calculation, we want that function to return the result so that we can actually use it in our code. So now, if you do not understand it yet, don't worry. As we go on, right, you would understand better. But this has gotten to the place where you can actually start watching this video like 2 times. You watch it the first time, you watch it the second time so that everything can sink in. All right. So, sometimes when you're reading a book, all right, you read. At a point, those things that they were saying before started making sense. So, all right, this thing I just explained now, when we start writing code, you're going to understand it better. And when you watch it again, it will make more sense. All right. So that is why we do not pressure our students into learning. We need you to take your time because these things, they need time to you need time to digest them. Okay. So now function parameters are like placeholder. I'm asking you for something so that I can work with. All right. You're going to be using my function. So give me something that I expect from you. So if you give me that thing, I will perform the task I want to perform with that thing you're giving me. Then I could return the results to you. return values are not compulsory. Parameters are also not compulsory. You have seen where when you don't expect anything from the whoever that will be using the function, whether you or another person, you don't have to you don't have to expect anything from there. So there will be no parameters. And if they are not expecting anything from you, there will be no return values. So put it this way, function parameters are the people who will be using your function are people who function parameters are what you're expecting from people who will use your function. While return value are what people who are going to use your function are expecting from you, are expecting from that function. Okay. All right. So let's get deeper. So JavaScript functions can accept parameters that give them data to work with. You understand? They accept parameters that give them data to work with. The same thing I was saying, I'm expecting you to give me something I can work with. Right now, in that function, I'm going to be doing something. I'm going to perform a specific task, but I'm expecting you to give me something that I can work with. So I accept parameters that's the data I want to work with. Okay. So these parameters can be simple or they can be complex. Yes, they can be simple names, just like I have told you. They could be arrays, they could be objects. Yes, we haven't discussed arrays, but we have discussed object to a limit, okay? But the thing is that even when I mention arrays, we are going to take it easy. And I will try to explain as much as possible. But if you don't understand any example with arrays, don't worry. We will talk about arrays later on, all right, in another chapter, okay? So the parameters can be very simple, just like your name, all right? Or it can be complex, like it can be arrays, it can be it can even be another function, or it can even be an object. Okay, so we have something like we call default values, the structuring, and the rest parameters. We'll talk about them here, okay? So types of parameters. The first one is the required parameter. When we say required, we expect you to give us that parameter. We expect you, it is required. So now, the basic function parameters that must be provided when the function is called, you must give us that parameter. You must. If you're using that function, you must give us the parameter. But what happens when you don't give us the parameter? That means that value that we are using inside will have to be undefined. So omitting them may lead to undefined values. Omitting them will lead to undefined values. I'm going to show you a trick on how you can actually do this. So function like greet, function greet, then name is a parameter we expect and it is required. So we are saying return hello. Now we are having a return value here now, okay? All right, but I'm going to make an example where I'm not going to use this return. I will not use this return because we haven't talked about return yet. So I'm just going to concentrate on parameters. So here, when you do console.log, it outputs hello Alice. Okay. When you do console.log, there is this guy in this second console. We do not provide the parameter. It will output hello undefined. So let's go to code. Let me show you. Now, okay, I will still continue with functions here, but let me create another file and call it, I will just say parameters, parameters.js. Okay. Now, look at what we are saying. We are talking about required parameter here, okay? We are talking about required parameter, required parameters. I have this function, okay? Then this function is expecting, sorry, the name of this function is greet, and it is expecting a required. Once you put this, if you want to put it like this, once you enter a parameter like this, it is a required one. So what do I want to do with this thing? I could just say console.log. Okay, I will just say hello. I could just say hello and name. Okay, so now, but what happens? Okay, now the thing with require parameter is this: when you're calling this, you must give it to us. We expect it to give it to us. So for me to call this function, sorry, I could just say greet. I will say greet, and what am I now? This greet is actually a string. Okay, so I'm expecting your name. Now, if I run this, What's happening? I run again. Okay. Okay, you can see it has printed hello for me. But now what happens if I'm going to show you something that this could be source of errors. What happens if they did not provide anything? All right, if I save, what happens if somebody calls this function without providing the parameter that is required? It will print hello undefined. That means this guy did not provide the parameter that is required. So whenever you're creating a function, all right, anything inside the bracket and the parenthesis is called parameter. When you're calling it, anything you put inside or is expected inside is called an argument. Okay. All right. So parameter, when you're declaring your function, anything inside the parenthesis is parameter. When you're calling the function, anything inside the parenthesis is called argument. Okay. Now you can see this is undefined. And this can be source of errors. Do you understand? Now, let me show you. This session might be lengthy because I'm going to show you a lot of simple examples here. So what happens if, let's say I have another function and I say, sorry, the function is sum. All right. So I'm summing, I will have first number, I will have second number. And you can see they are all required. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say console.log. All right, I will say first number plus second number. All right, so if I call, I could just comment this function. So I don't want it to run. Sorry. Okay, so if I call this sum now, all right, I say sum, and let's imagine we actually gave it what it was expecting from us. If I do this, of course, we will get 10, right? That is the expected result. We will get 10. But what happens if I do not provide one of them? All right, that means it is going to be undefined. The one that we did not provide will be undefined. Remember when we did it from the first example with the grid, we got undefined. The name was undefined. So if you did not provide a value, when you're calling the function and you did not provide that argument for a required parameter, it is going to be undefined. So if I run this code now, look at what we are going to have 7 plus undefined, which will give us unexpected result. It is going to give us not a number. Why? Because this one of them was not provided, and the value will be undefined. So whenever you don't provide an argument that is a required parameter, all right, JavaScript would automatically give it undefined. And when you now add undefined plus a number, it is going to give you unexpected results. So this is one of the causes of errors in JavaScript, and that is why in TypeScript. That is what TypeScript was created. All right. We would also learn TypeScript later on in this whole course, front end or back end or full stack. Okay, you're going to learn TypeScript. So now you can see we are having some errors. So now, if you do not understand this thing I'm explaining now, it could be source of errors for you. So pay close attention. We are talking about required parameters. So whenever you have anything like this, where you provide, you're declaring your function and you gave it the parameter here, it is a required one. And when the user or even whoever is calling the function, when they do not provide the parameter or the argument for that parameter, it will be undefined, just like we have seen. So if I say, okay, console, if I say, all right, let's do this. If I say, I will say console, I will say fn is this. Look at what will happen. Fn, all right, I will say, I'll put fn here, and I will do another one. I'll say sn is Sn. So if I run this code now, I just want to print now, we did not provide anything for the second one, which is Sn. So let's run this code and you're going to see what we are going to console. We expected that since we did not provide this Sn, the value for Sn in this sum function, it is going to be undefined. So if I run, you're going to see it's going to be undefined. Fn was provided, which is 7. Sn wasn't provided. So since it wasn't provided, it is going to be undefined. But if we provide it, Okay, it's not going to be undefined anymore. So pay close attention today. This could be source of errors. Do you understand it now? So whenever you're short, the best way could be this, all right? You can actually check if Fn is not equal to, if Fn is not equal to if Fn is not equal to undefined, all right? And, all right, you're using logical operators now, and Sn is not equal to undefined. That is when we want to do something here. Do you understand? Whatever you want to do, okay, whatever you want to do. Else, we will print. So this is the security measure here for your code not to crash. So we will print, please provide all the required arguments. Okay? So you can see now, we have actually sorted it out now. So we are not going to have, here now we are checking. So we can just go back to saying console.log. Here now, even if we don't provide it, we will not have that unexpected result anymore. We can now say Fn plus Sn, all right? And so if I run this code now, all right, now first of all, to check if Fn is equal to undefined, and Sn not equal to, so this will pass. So now if I run this code now, of course we are going to get 15, but what if I do not provide one of them? What do you think would happen? All right, if I run this code now, it's going to say please provide all the required arguments. Now let's run by debugging. So let's say I do it here, and I'm going to start debugging. Okay, I'll start debugging. All right, so we are here. So, oh, I could have put this, okay. All right, so we are here now, okay? So this function has been called, so we got into here. So I'll click step over. All right, you can see it has moved out of here because this condition was not going to be true because one of them here was undefined. So we are saying and, we're using the and logical operator. So this must be true and this must be true. So none of them could be undefined. So if that is why you saw it here. So if I continue, we are going to print, it is going to print please provide all right? So now, but if I provide a value here, okay, and run and debug, all right, it will get to here, and if I step, all right, you can see it now got in here because this evaluation was true. So it now got in here, and if we continue, it prints out 15 for us. So this is required arguments, required parameters, okay? This is required parameters. I just wanted to elaborate on it, okay? So whenever you have a required parameter and you do not provide the values, it's going to be undefined. So always watch it whenever you're doing this because your users might not use this function very well. So you always have to check for their values before you continue, okay? All right, so let's go on. The next one we have are default parameters. So this was introduced in ES6. ES is actually a newer version of JavaScript that came with better ways to solve some of the problems JavaScript were having. So default parameters allow setting default values for parameters if none are provided. So I'm going to explain better. So look at it. In case this guy did not, in case people who are calling this function did not provide the name parameter, the name argument, all right, we are going to assign a stranger, okay? So now let's go back to our code and use this example we've been using. Let's assume that they did not provide value for Sn, all right? So I'm going to give it a default parameter. I will say Sn equal to, and I will say Sn is 7. That's the default parameter. So since I have given a default parameter here, I will not need to check this one again, right? Because this is no longer required because we already have a value for Sn. So we could just check only Fn. to be undefined. So watch, look at what will happen. If I run this code now, because we provided 8, this value will not be used again. This 7 will not be used because we have given it a value. All right. So we will still get 15 as usual, as expected. All right. But what if I did not provide anyone for Sn now? All right. Since I did not provide anyone for Sn, Sn is going to be equal to 7. It's going to use a default. So we are giving it a default value. So that's the default parameter. In the default parameter, you're giving it a default value. And this will be done inside when you're declaring the parameter. All right. So here now we did not provide Sn, but when we run this code, all right, it's going to do 7. So 7 plus 7 will give us 14. All right. You can see it's 14. But when we provide a number, let's say we provide 9, all right, the default parameter will no longer come to play. It's only come to play when it is missing, when we did not provide it. So if I run now, you're going to get 16. Okay, so that is it. Okay, so we also have the one we call rest parameters. Now, this is where it could be advanced a bit because we have not talked about arrays. Okay, now, but rest parameter lets you handle an indefinite number of parameters as an array. So whenever your parameter starts with dot, dot, 3 dots before the name of the parameter, JavaScript will see it as anything you provide inside there will be treated as an array. Okay, so it is useful when you don't know how many arguments the function will receive. Let's assume that you created a sum function and you're not too sure, you just want to make it general that you can give us any number of numbers, all right, to add for you. So when you do this, look at this. Here we are having a sum, okay? Don't worry, let me just go to our own practical here. Now, I do not, let's say, let me rewrite this function. Let me rewrite this function. I'm expecting, okay, I say sum, and I'm expecting that any number you give me, I can just say numbers, okay? So, I could say console, I could just say console.log, okay? There is this, don't bother about if you don't understand what I'm going to do, but this numbers.reduce, okay? And, oops, okay? So I will take the first value, let me call it A, and I'll say the current value is B. So I'm just going to, don't bother if you don't understand what I'm doing here, please don't bother. I can just say A plus B. Don't bother if you don't understand what I'm doing here. I'm just going to explain to you later. So let me run the code and make sure that my code is working perfectly before I will now explain. All right, wonderful. Okay, so I put another number. All right, so it is working fine. So let me now explain, okay? All right, so now look at it. This thing is called rest parameters. If you don't understand it, don't bother. We will talk about rest parameter as a section on its own and explain it in depth, okay? But right now, this is called rest parameter, okay? So whenever you have something like this, you can actually look at the way I actually gave the argument. So anything, JavaScript will see that everything you put in here, JavaScript will see it as an array. All right. So let me also do something like this. We have not talked about array, but let me console.log and I will just console numbers. Let's see what we get. So if I do this and run, JavaScript is going to see everything that I provided here as argument to be an array. So whenever you use, look at it, it's an array. All right. So whenever you use rest parameters like this, anything JavaScript will see all the arguments as an array. So you can work with these numbers here as an array, but that will be by the way. We have not talked about arrays, and we also have to talk about this rest parameter later on. But now just understand there's something called rest parameters, and whatever you put in like this, dot dot dot, JavaScript will see it as an array, and you can all the numbers you put in here or all the values you put in here will be seen as an array. If you don't understand it, no problem. I mentioned this thing before. If you don't get it, no problem. We'll talk about arrays later. We'll talk about rest parameters. But just understand that there's something called rest parameters when it comes to function parameter types, okay? All right. So we have another one we call the structuring parameters. Now, I could try to explain this because we have already done objects. So you can pass a parameter, an object can be, your parameter can be an object. So function parameters can be the structure to directly access objects or array properties. I'm going to explain this thing better, okay? So this made the code more readable and more manageable. Let me just go to code and explain. I think this will be more practical. So you know what we mean by objects, okay? So let's assume that we already have an object here. I will have a constant, let me just call this a student object. And this student has a first name, a first name, and the name is Paulson. All right. This student has a last name, and the last name is Mohan. Okay. All right. Now, this is what I can pass in. I can say, let me just change this function name. Okay. I could just create another function. I will call it student details. Okay. All right. So what am I going to do? I'm going to pass in a student as a parameter. Look at it. I'm passing a student as a parameter. Before I go into the structuring, we will talk about the structuring extensively in a section later on, but let me just show you how you can destructure. Now, I could just say console.log student dot first name. I could also say console.log student dot last name. So if I do this, and I will call this function student details. Okay. I'll call this and I'll pass in the student. Okay, so this student is just the okay, let me call the student param so that it will not cause confusion. Let me just say student param. Okay, and here I will do. Okay, so you can see now this is this parameter, and here I'm passing the real student object here. So you can pass in an object as a parameter to a function, and when you're calling it, you just passing the student as an argument. This is the student object we already have. So if I run this code now, all right, you're going to see console.log person, and we are going to console it. Now, but what if, now this is called, we are not using the structuring here, but since I know that first name and last name are properties of the parameter I'm going to be using, I could just do something like this. I could just put them in a curly braces like this, and I will now say first name and last name. Now, when I do this, I will not need to use the dot operator again, the dot notation. I will not need to use it again to access the properties. I have destructured. I'm expecting that the parameter that is going to come in is going to be a student object, and this student object has properties. So first name and last name. So I am not destructuring it. So this is how you destructure. If you don't understand it, please don't worry. Don't worry. Now, we will talk about the structuring later, okay? So, but just understand that you can pass in an object. So if you don't want to use the structuring, you can use the first method I used, okay? So now, if I run this is what we are going to have. We are going to have the same results, person and one, because we have destructured this student object that we provided here as an argument. We have destructured it, and we are using the properties right away inside of our function. I don't want to confuse you more. If you don't understand it, don't worry. We'll talk about the structuring in a later section extensively. Okay? Just understand that you can pass in an object as a parameter, and you can destructure them just the way I have done. Okay? All right. So return values. Now let's go over to return values. Return values are how functions provide outputs. Now, if you're expecting something from the function should return something for you, okay? So in JavaScript, a function can return any type. including primitives, objects, arrays, or even other functions. Yes, even functions can even take functions as parameters. Don't worry, we'll talk about them in an advanced level, okay? All right, so what are the types of return values? Now, it can return a single value. All right, if the first type is a return single value, the single return value. So JavaScript can just return, a function can return a single value. All right, so here, let's go back to our code and show you how you can return a single value. So I think I'm going to clear everything again. I'll just clear everything here. Okay. And what am I going to do? I think I even cleared this my comment too. So I could just say function, all right? I'll call it sum, all right? And I'll say first number, second number. So what am I going to do? I would, of course, do this constant. I'll save the results. I will save the result here, and I will now do fn plus sn. But remember to check for undefined values. Remember to check for undefined values in order to not to get unexpected result. So I could now say return. I'll just use the return keyword, and I'll say I'm returning the result. So after, remember, function is supposed to perform a specific task. So after performing this task of addition, we are going to store the value in result, and we are returning whatever we have in result. All right. We could just still do the same thing like this. Instead of doing this whole thing, we could just say return. All right. So this is just a more professional way of doing it. All right. But the first one is more readable. So let's go back. Let's not cause more confusion. I'm assuming that everybody here is beginner's level. Okay, so let me not cause more confusion. Okay, so I would have to go back to what I had before. This is just a subtle way of doing it. Okay, so when I'm done, when I save it there, I'm going to now return the result. So after doing the after performing the whole thing, I'm returning result. So now, if you call this function, you are expecting something. So since you're expecting something when you call this function, you can as well save it. You can as well save it. So if I now say sum, okay, all right, the sum, I'm summing 4 and 8. So, all right, I am summing sum and 8. So I'm going to, whatever this function is going to return something for me, all right, because look at it, it's returning something. So whatever is returning, I'm going to save it here. And once I save it, I can now do with it whatever I want to do with it. It's up to you, okay? So I can now say results, okay? So if I run this code now, all right, we are going to get 12, sorry, because 4 plus 8 will give us 12. So let me debug, all right? Let me debug. So I'm debugging, all right? So we are here. This function has been called. So, okay, let me stop this and show you a better way of doing this. Instead of putting this thing here, I'm going to put this thing here. All right. So we are going to, this is where the function is being called. So let's put the breakpoint here. Don't worry, we'll talk about debugging in its own chapter extensively. All right. We'll explain debugging. So just follow me, the one I'm doing. So here, our program has stopped here. So now if I step over, all right. Oh, sorry. I should step in. Sorry. I should step into because that's a function. I would run and debug again. All right, so I'm in the function now. It's pointing in the function. So I have to step into this function. So this is step over, this is step into. So when I step into, it goes into this function. So it will do fn plus sn. I'll step over. We have the result. So what is our result? Our result is containing 12. So we have done the addition here. Fn plus sn, which is fn is 4, sn is what? 8. That's what we gave here. So the result will be here. So we are now returning the result. So when I step out, let me still step over. All right, so we are here. So our result now is, so we have actually, this function has run and has returned. So we are here. So our result here is 12. And we print it, all right, we get 12. So this is the return. This is how you do some return. After doing whatever you're doing, you can now return a variable. And what you're returning is actually the value of that variable. And when you're not calling the function, you can actually store whatever it is returning here, okay? So when I stop this, now we can, if we take my mouse over this, you can see that this function is returning something, okay? It's just that, you know, remember when we did comment, okay, when we did the comment where you can actually explain more, documentation comment. If we have done documentation comment here, we could actually have this. When I hover, you're going to see more of this. So you can actually practice that documentation comment again. Just add documentation comment to your functions, okay? All right. So the next one we take a look is we can return multiple values. Now with JavaScript functions can only return one thing. You cannot return more than one thing, but that one thing can be an array or an object. So you can return an object instead of a value. You can return an array instead of a value. Okay, so look at this function. All right, this function is divide and remainder. Okay. Now, this function is returning the division. It will give us this function will return the remainder of a function and also the quotient of a function. Okay, so that is what they are doing here. They are returning an object. All right, they are returning an object. All right, so you can return an object. So let me show you. Okay, let's say here we have this function, okay. This function will return it will return quotient and remainder. I hope I get it correctly. Okay, so give us two numbers. What is it called again? Denominator and numerator and denominator. I'm sorry if I don't get this thing right. I can say give me the numerator and give me the denominator. Okay, denominator. What I just mean here is the one that will divide and the one that will be on top. Okay, I'm having an error here, so I'm not supposed to use this. Okay, so I can just do this. Okay, so what do I want to return? I want to return an object. So why do you return an object? You return an object like this. So with this, I can return, this can be an empty object. But what do I want to return? I want to say quotient. Okay. And what will be the value of this quotient? I'm returning an object, and the first property is quotient. What will be the value of this quotient? The value would be numerator divided by denominator. All right. And the remainder would be what? This might not be the best. I could use the math object, just like they use in the slide. But we have not talked about the math object, the math class. So we'll talk about it when we're talking about classes, okay? So that's why I don't want to use it. So I can now say numerator. I believe you understand what I'm doing here. So basically, I am returning an object. And this object, I'm returning this is an object I'm returning, and it will have properties like quotient and remainder, and these are their values, okay? As simple as that. So I can now call this function, and remember, I'm expecting something. I could just say result, okay? And I will just call the quotient, and I will give it 10. I will give it 10 and 2. So the numerator is 10, the denominator is 4. So let's just console.log this result that we have. So if I run this now, all right, we are going to get an object. So look at the object that we got. So you can see the quotient is 5 and the remainder is 0. If you don't understand objects, please go back to the object class chapter that we discussed. or the object section that we discussed. All right, so this is very simple. Just like we returned the result the other time, here we are returning an object. All right, so this is how simple it is. If you don't understand, please contact us. We can privately chat us up so that we can explain more. So this is you returning an object. You can also return an array. So as we go on, you're going to be seeing how we return objects and arrays. So you can return multiple values in an object or in an array. So here we want to return the quotient and the remainder. And how are we doing it? We are doing it in an object. We are returning it in an object. So if you want to access this, I can say result dot quotient. So if I just want to get the quotient, I can just do this, and I will just have because I have access to the object. So the quotient is 5. Okay. All right. So don't worry if you don't understand much of what we are doing here. As we go on, you're going to understand better. Okay. So you can also return functions. All right, but I'm not going to go too much here because this could be more advanced. So we call them higher order functions. Just like I have returned an object, you can also return function. So here we are returning a function. All right. Don't worry. We will not talk too much about this, but understand that you can return functions. It is called higher order function. A function that returns another function is called higher order function. We'll talk about it when we start talking about advanced functions, okay? So you can also return nothing. You can return void, you can return nothing. You have seen it where we didn't return anything. Whenever you don't use the return keyword inside your function, it is not returning anything. So functions without a return statement will implicitly return undefined. Okay, so such functions are often used to perform actions like logging or modifying global state or consoling. So they did not return anything. So when you don't use the return keyword, you are not returning anything. Okay, so here we are not using the return keyword. So this function will not return anything. So if you want to save the return value of this function, it's going to give you undefined. So the result is going to be undefined. You can try it out on your own. Write a function that does not have any return keyword. They're just consoling something they're just consoling something to the console, and save the return value and print the return value out to see it will give you undefined. Okay. So what are the best practices for functions? Use default parameters for optional arguments. This improves readability and avoids undefined checks. So whenever you could use default values, use default parameters. If you cannot, always check out for undefined before using the values, because you're not sure what the user is going to give you. So always make sure that you check for undefined before you use any value that you're using. So use the structuring for complex objects. Limit the number of parameters. Too many parameters can make a function very confusing. Consider using an object as a single parameter if needed. All right. We'll talk as we advance. You're going to see more of this. Whenever you have more than 2 parameters, it is advised that you use an object or an array. Do you understand? Or maybe the rest parameter. So as we go on, you're going to understand better. All right. So explicit return for clarity. Return undefined if a function should not produce a return value, which makes intent clear to others reading the code. So what are they saying here? If you have a function like this, a function that is not returning anything, explicitly use, if I say greet, okay, if I say greet, all right, and I'm not going to use any parameter there, and I say console.log, and I just say hello, okay, all right. So what they're saying here is you can see that this function does not have any return. It's not returning anything, but you should explicitly, for clarity's sake, say return like this. You could do return like this, or you could say return undefined like this. Whichever way, make it explicit that you're not returning anything. So that's what they mean here. Okay, I think I have not been doing this. I think I will start doing that. Explicitly return undefined if a function should not produce a return value. So explicitly return undefined if we are not returning anything. Do you understand? So whenever somebody calls it, they will know that, oh, this is returning undefined. Okay, so that is it. So thank you very much. I will see you in the next section. Please, we need your comments in the comment sections. Like this this class or dislike it. Rate this class. We just need your feedback, okay? And make sure you do your test. Make sure you do your assignment. Don't skip your assignment. Your assignments are meant to make you stronger, to make you better. So write the assignment, do the assignment, write the code that we asked you to write, okay? Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next section.